Well, hello, Stacey Murphy here with a quick video on why harvesting your garden is so important. And I was trying to shoot this video out in the garden. It was way too windy, so I had to come inside. So 3 reasons why harvesting is so important in your garden. The first, of course, is that we're growing food. And in order for it to become food, we have to harvest it first. We have to put it on a plate. We have to eat it. So number 1 reason why learning how to harvest is so important. Number 2 reason why learning how to harvest is so important is that when you are harvesting, you're basically making sure that you eat the food instead of pests. And so the more food that we take out of the garden at the right time, the ripe fruit out of the garden, that means that pests can't get to them. And oftentimes what I see too is I sometimes see beginners, they improperly harvest, which invites pests into the garden. So you don't want to do that. So that's number 2, and I'll show you something regarding that later in this video. Number 3 reason why harvesting is so important is that when we're working with plants, what happens is when we harvest and make space, we're basically allowing the plant to produce more food. So oftentimes harvesting more means more yield. So basically that means food, no pests, higher yields. Those are 3 great reasons to learn how to harvest properly, right? So I thought I'd do a really quick pop quiz video here for you on harvesting and some of the things that you need to know as a beginner. So first pop quiz question: when is the right time to harvest your crops? So the best time to harvest your crops is in the coolest part of the day. And oftentimes that means in the early morning if possible. That's going to mean that the produce tastes the best, it's got the most nutrients packed in, it's going to store longer. And another great time to harvest is right before you eat, because obviously when you pick the food, it's got the most amount of nutrients and you just put that right on your dinner plate, right? Okay, so pop quiz question number 2. Do we have to wash our produce that comes out of our garden? No, actually we don't. And here's the thing. So you may have to wash your produce if you think that there are any contaminants, if you have any uncomposted manure in your garden, or you have somebody who harvested the crops who maybe didn't wash their hands before they harvested and they should have, anything that could bring contaminants onto your dinner plate, then you wash them, right? But if we're growing organically, we're not really washing our produce when we add water. What we're really doing is we're cooling down the crops when we harvest. And what we're doing is we're removing field heat. So the sun, as photosynthesis happens, it's heating up our plants, and the plants are storing all of that heat. And so when we go and we harvest, if some of that heat is left in the plant, it doesn't store as long. So that's what we're doing when we add water. You can definitely rinse your crops if you feel like there's soil on it that you want to brush off. But there are some crops that just don't want to be washed. Things like tomatoes, they taste best when you just pick them and eat them. And speaking of tomatoes, I mentioned the best time to pick crops is in the early morning. The one crop that I would say maybe doesn't follow that rule is tomatoes. They taste really great in the peak time of the day when the sun is hot. You pick that tomato and it's going to be really delicious. So there's always a couple of exceptions, right? All right, so speaking of exceptions, what's the one herb? I said that you want to basically store your crops cool. You want to cool them down, right? So a lot of times we're putting our crops in our refrigerator if we're not eating them right away. So pop quiz question number 3, which herb doesn't like to go in the fridge? It's my favorite. It's basil. And so with basil, what happens when it gets below 50 degrees is it starts to bruise and it starts to degrade. It doesn't taste as good. So with basil, what I would recommend, every other herb, you can harvest it, put it in the fridge if you want to store it. But with basil, what I would recommend is making a little bouquet and putting it on your table. And that way it's beautiful, and then also it'll stay really fresh, and the leaves will stay really nice and fresh too. And of course, you can always harvest your basil right before you eat it, and it's going to be delicious that way too. Okay, so pop quiz harvest question number 4. Which of these eggplant is ripe? Which one's ready for picking? So the way that you tell that eggplant is ripe is that when you press it gently with your thumb, it's not super hard. It actually, you can feel your thumb press into the eggplant a little bit, and it still has a glossy sheen. So Eggplant can be a variety of different color. Color is not going to tell you a whole lot. You have to understand the softness and also that the glossiness is still there. If your eggplant loses its glossiness, it means that it's just a tad overripe, and I would recommend picking that right away and cooking that up, roasting it in the oven right away. Okay, so pop quiz question number 5 for this harvest quiz. Should you cut or should you pull off the leaves of your green plants, things like chard, kale, and collards? All right, so remember at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that there are ways to improperly harvest where you can invite pests into your garden. Well, these crops, what you really want to do is pull gently down and kind of twist off, and the leaf will come off of the stem. And when you do that, what you're basically making a clean break from the leaf to the stem. So if you don't pull the leaf off and you just cut it off, what's going to happen is that it leaves a little stub on the plant. And what happens to that stub is it starts to degrade and decompose, and pests and disease can enter the plant that way. It also creates a nice little shelf where pests can hang out. So if that happens, if you are cutting those leaves off, what you want to do is then at the end, after you're done cutting them off, you want to go through and just pull off those little nubs so that you have a clean stem, nothing that pests can grab onto. Now, when the plants are young, things like chard, sometimes it's hard to pull those leaves off when those plants are young. So you can cut them off and then later go back and gently pull them off. All right, so that's a quick pop quiz for some harvesting tips in your garden. It's important, like I said, to harvest correctly and also harvest often, right? All right, Stacey Murphy here. See you in the next video.